So I literally just made this entire video and realized that my professional YouTube studio microphone was not plugged in. I know, it's the first video on my channel. This is what it's going to sound like for the rest of my videos. I'm sorry for the relatively bad quality. It doesn't sound too bad though. If it was really bad, I would redo it. But it's also over an hour, so I'm not going to redo it. Welcome to the channel. Enjoy the video.
Hi everyone, my name is Matthew Bellavia and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be making a game in Java using NetBeans and using JFrames and JPanels to create a little platformer game that I have on screen right here. But really fast, let me introduce myself. I'm a high school IB computer science student and I've been coding for a long time. I'm most proficient in Java and GML, but I've used every language a little bit here and there. And I've been coding for a while and I found that tutorials online are typically somewhere between not helpful at all and moderately helpful. They're confusing, they're hard to follow. There's very few ones that, actually have text large enough you can see and people speaking that you can understand clearly and hear well. And I have some experience with YouTube making other videos, and I decided to make coding videos because I feel like I could make really helpful videos, and I figured I'd have some fun with it. So here we are making a game in Java. The first thing that drives me insane about these kinds of videos is they don't actually show what you're going to be making until the end, and then it's not what you thought it was. So here it is, we're going to be making a platformer game in Java. This is obviously not textured or anything yet, that would be for future videos. I'm hoping to do a series here. But right now we just have a little player that you can move around with WASD. You can jump and we're colliding with the walls and the ground. There's gravity implemented. And the collision system works really well. You can't really get stuck on anything, even on the corners here. I'm trying to get stuck and I can't. But yeah, so this is our game. This is what we're going to be making today. It takes quite a lot of time in Java. Java isn't the most helpful interface for things like this. Well, not interface, but most helpful language for something like this. But I feel like everyone should know Java. It was the first language I ever learned. Well, I guess it wasn't. I guess GML was. But the first language I learned in like an actual class, not just kind of from my own watching YouTube videos and things like that. But anyways, this is what we're going to be making. This should be a relatively simple video. If you have no experience, you should be able to follow what I'm doing and still keep up. I'm going to make sure the text is really large and try and explain things as best I can, but also I'm not going to get into every explanation. So you should have a general knowledge of kind of like what classes and objects and variables are and things like that. But if you don't, you could still watch this video and just copy the code exactly. If you do, hopefully you'll understand it, and maybe you just want to see how I do something, and that works as well. But anyways, this is going to be our end product. We're going to start from scratch though, so I'm going to close out of that, and we're going to create a new project. I do have my code over here on this monitor to reference, so I'm going to be looking over there a lot. And I've already made the program, as you just saw, so hopefully we won't have any errors or things like that that we need to go through and revise, because that's another thing that's super annoying when you're watching a video and they end up changing half of it as you go along. Anyways, we're going to call the project, we're going to create a new project by clicking the little yellow folder up in the top left here. And we're going to call it Platformer Game Tutorial. So now we're going to create the project. We'll let that run for just a moment there. And before we actually type in any code at all, I'm going to make it a little bit larger. Something you can do with NetBeans. The little trick is you hold down Alt and you can zoom just like this. So we're gonna make it a little bit larger. Let me see, does that look good? That looks pretty good. I'm gonna go a tiny bit larger. Just because I know a lot of you guys might be on mobile. I think like 50% of all YouTube traffic's on mobile, and it can be a little harder to see on there. I definitely want you guys to be able to see. Definitely use a 1080p setting. This should be exported in 1080 60, I believe. Maybe not 60, but definitely 1080. 1080p, the resolution. I don't know about the frames per second, but definitely use the best resolution as possible so you can see it clearly. I want to make sure you guys can see that. We're going to create a new class by clicking the little white paper up here. Before we actually type in any code, we're going to create just a regular Java class, nothing else. We could do a swing form right here, make a JFrame form, but I don't like the design tab that comes along with that, and it just messes with what I'm trying to do. And if you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. We're going to create a regular Java class here, and we're going to hit next. We're going to call it mainFrame, because this is going to be the only frame that we're using, but the JFrame that we use for our program here. We don't want to call it JFrame because that just causes a lot of confusions with like the built-in JFrame thing. I don't even know if it would even let us call it JFrame. It will, but that's going to cause some confusion. So you want to call it something that's not JFrame, but as long as it's not JFrame, it doesn't really matter what it's called as long as it's not like super confusing or anything like that. And before we do anything else, we're going to type in right in the class right here, public class mainFrame, we're going to type extends, and then this is actually case sensitive, so before I forget, let me make this a lot larger here. Is that look good? About the same size? Yeah, let's do that. Mainframe extends. Oh, excuse me. Click right there. javax.swing.jframe, just like that. javax.swing.J frame, just like that. You want to make sure, I believe that is case sensitive. So we're going to type that in right there, and all that's going to do is that's going to tell Java that this is a JFrame. This isn't just a normal class that's going to create like an object. This is actually going to be creating a JFrame. So now we're going to go back to our original file here, get rid of the comment right there, and we're going to create our JFrame. So we're going to go mainframe, a capital F there. Again, this is case sensitive for whatever the name you just chose for the class that we created. So make sure that's the same. And we're going to say mainframe, we're going to call it frame. Mainframe frame is equal to new mainframe. Which seems extremely repetitive, but I hope you didn't call your frame, because then it would be frame equals new frame. But anyways, all this does is mainframe is like the blueprints for the frame that we're creating. And then frame is the name for this specific instance. So if we wanted, we could create like multiple of them. And again, I'm assuming you guys kind of already have a general knowledge of that. If you don't, you can still keep up, but I'm not going to get too much into the details. So if you already know all this stuff, don't worry, we're not going to talk about that forever. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to add some parameters to our frame that we just created. So the first thing I'm going to do is frame.setSize. That is case sensitive. And I'm not going to keep saying that because most things in Java are case sensitive. So just make sure you pay attention to that. And we're going to choose 700 by 700 for the size. 700 is the width, 700 is the height. You could do something different if you wanted. You could do like 1280 by 720, 1920 by 1080, whatever you want. I like 700. I think it's a good size for what we're doing and for demonstration purposes. And then we're actually, the next 2 lines of code is going to be centering our frame to put it in the middle of the screen as opposed to the corner. This is going to be a little bit complicated here, but don't really worry about it. We're not like getting back to this at any other point. So honestly, if you don't understand this, I would just copy the code. But all we're going to say is dimension. We're going to create a new dimension. And dimensions are just objects that store the x and y coordinates of something. So we're going to say dimension screen size, call it screen size, equals toolkit.getDefault toolkit, toolkit.get screen size. Just like that. So all that's saying is it's going to give the our dimension object called screen size, it's going to give it the dimensions of our window. So for example, this is the entire window I'm using right here on my laptop. It's 1920 by 1080, and it's going to give it that size because some screens have different sizes. We are getting an error because we're going to have to add some imports for this. So we're going to import dimension, and we're going to import toolkit. With NetBeans, it'll give you that suggestion. You just want to click the little question mark or whatever that is, light bulb, and click the first option. But if you miss that, it's right here. Import java.awt.dimension and import java.awt.toolkit, just like that. That's all that happened when I click those two little buttons, is it'll add the imports right there. Then the next line we're going to do is we're going to say frame.setLocation, just like that, and we're going to cast it to an integer. Then we're going to say screen size get width divided by 2 minus frame get size get width divided by 2. That's half of it. That's our width, and then we're going to cast the integer again, and we're going to say screen size get height. This is kind of long. This is probably the longest line of code we're gonna have in our entire project here. Get height divided by 2 minus frame get size get height divided by 2. We're gonna close the bracket, semicolon. Missing a bracket. I think we need one more bracket there. Yeah, we need one more bracket. No, maybe not. Hold up. We're missing a bracket at the beginning here. There we go, that's it. So this is split across, this is split across 2 lines, so it's kind of hard to see here. I'm gonna go through one more time. It's frame.setLocation, and then we're gonna put a open bracket, and we're gonna have integer right here just to cast the variable to an integer. Then we're gonna have another open bracket, screen size.get width divided by 2 minus frame.get size.get width divided by 2. Then the exact same thing with, instead of width, we're using height. And all this does is it's going to take the size of our entire screen, divided by 2 to put it in the middle. Then it's also going to subtract the width of our frame and divide it by 2, because otherwise the top left corner would be in the middle of the screen, but we want the middle of our frame to be in the middle of the screen. And I'll show you guys that in just a second. But again, not the most important line. If you don't want to even add that, you don't have to, but I know that's kind of complicated. Don't worry about understanding everything there. That's probably the longest line we'll have in this entire program. Now a couple other simple things. We're going to say frame.setResizable. There's no E after the Z in resizable. That always gets people. Set that to false. because we don't want people to be able to resize their frame. It just messes it up and makes resolutions weird, and like things will be sized weird. We don't want to deal with any of that. Then we're also going to say frame.setTitle. We're going to call it platform name. I'll show you that in just a second. And then we're going to say frame.setVisible true. Just like that. So now if we run our program here, you'll see that we'll have a frame pop up. And moved our output up there, but here's our frame, and it also started in the middle of our screen. Had we not had that big line, long line of code, it would have started up here, but it started in the middle because of that line, which is really helpful. I'm going to close out of that, and then note that that's not going to stop our program, so we also have to click the little red stop button right here. I'm going to move my output down to here, so it's out of the way a little bit. Let's space this out a lot more. Now, one last thing that we are going to do before this is the last thing for this class, but we are going to make sure that when we close the frame, it also stops our program, because otherwise we can have like a bunch of them running in the background. We don't want to deal with any of that. So we're going to say frame.setDefault close operation to dispose _on _close. Just like that in all caps. I believe we need an import for that. Yeah, import javax.swing.window constants dispose and close. Again, just click the default there, but if you missed it, this is it right here. So now what should happen is when we run our program, you can see we're running right down here. These little green lines means that we're running. If we close here, close it right down there because that went away, and we can see build successful time 9 seconds. I know that's really small, sorry, but so that will close our program. That's all we need with that. Now we're going to move on to the frame class, which is also going to be quite small. We need to do just a couple things. Within our frame class, we're actually going to be creating our panel because we're going to display everything within the panel, but a panel on its own doesn't work very well, so we're going to put the panel within the frame. For those of you wondering why I'm not just using a frame, frames can flicker sometimes and have some weird issues. That's why I like using panels, and this is just the way that works. So we're going to create a new class again by clicking the white paper in the top left. New Java class. We're going to call this one game panel. You could call it main panel if you wanted, but that could make some confusion if you have like a menu panel and things like that. If we wanted to have like a menu, then a game, a pause menu, things like that, it'll make it a little bit more difficult to figure out what you're talking about. So that's why I like using a game panel, so we know that we're in game and we're on this panel. Finish. We're going to create that. And let's make this text a little bit bigger again. Right there's probably good. This smaller. And same thing as with the frame, right after public class game panel, we're gonna tell it that it extends. This time it's gonna be javax.swing.jPanel instead of frame. Just like that. And caps does matter, so make sure you have that done correctly. And now we have our game panel class. Now we're gonna go back to frame and we're gonna create an instance of game panel right in here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna first type game panel. You can call it whatever you want. I'm just gonna call it panel. If we had multiple panels, you could call it like panel 1, panel 2, or game panel with lowercase, whatever you want to call it. But I'm just gonna call it panel for right now. Game panel equals new game panel, just like that, and then we're gonna add some parameters to our panel as we did with our frame. So we're gonna say panel.setLocation. This time we're gonna do 0, 0 because this location is relative to the frame, and we want it in the same place as the frame. Did I spell something wrong there? What did I do wrong? Package panel does not exist. Interesting. Give me just a minute, I'll figure this out. I'll be back in just a moment. Oh, this is an obvious mistake. My bad, guys. Sorry, I know I said get annoyed when people make errors, but we're human. I made a quick error here. We can't just start creating things already because we're still within the class, we're not within the constructor yet. So we're gonna create a constructor first. Type public mainframe just like that. And now whenever our mainframe is created, this is like the create event if you're used to like GameMaker or maybe I think Unity is create events too, I'm not totally certain. But every time we create a mainframe, all the code within here is gonna be ran. So we're actually gonna copy that, back it up, and we're gonna paste that within here. If we put it above here, this is just like within the whole class, but the code doesn't really know when to run that. That's just my mistake. So we're gonna have game panel equals new game panel, panel.setLocation 0, 0, just like that. Again, that puts it in the top left corner, which is where we want it. Panel.setSize, this .getSize, that's gonna create the panel to be the same size as the frame. Again, not too complicated. Panel.setBackground You can do whatever color you want. I went with color dot light gray, just like this, and the color is gonna be all caps. Then you do have to import java dot, I believe it's util or awt.color. Right there, java.awt.color as an import. A couple other parameters are almost done. We're gonna say panel.set visible true. And then we're gonna say this.add panel. And what that does is that's gonna add the panel to the JFrame, otherwise we wouldn't be able to see it. That's all we're gonna have there for now. On to our game panel class, this is where we're gonna keep a lot of the stuff. So one thing before we do anything else with the game panel is we do want to set it up as an action listener, and this is just something that I'll explain a little bit later, but it makes it so it can take in like events going on with the games and things like that. Just about any game you want it to implement action listener. So right after JPanel here, we're gonna say implements action listener right there. I believe we need an import for that. There's the import, and it should also make us create the method. Implement all abstract methods is what we're going to want. We're going to click that right there, and it's going to create the action performed method. We don't need this throw line here. You can get rid of that. So we're going to backspace that right there. There we go, and we're just going to leave that for now. Let's not worry about that. We'll get back to that later. We're going to create the constructor for our panel. So we're going to have public game panel just like that. And then we're going to add a bunch of parameters within there, but really quick, we want to establish some variables that are going to be accessed within all of our classes. Because if we create a variable right down here, like int count, for example, and then if we created a new class outside of the constructor, you wouldn't be able to read count. It's not going to know what you're talking about. So we need to establish the variables outside of the constructor right up here. Some things we're going to create is player. We're going to make a player class in just a moment. So that's going to be again, player being just referencing the blueprints to the player object, and then the lowercase player being the actual instance that we're using. You could call it like our player, my player, something like that, whatever you like to call it. But we're gonna use that in just a little bit. We're also gonna create an array list of wall objects. Actually, I'm not gonna create that yet because I want to be able to run the program before we get there. So let's not worry about that yet. And we'll get to that just a little bit later. We're gonna create a timer though. So timer, game timer. Right there, and then we're going to import. And this is important. You do not want the swing timer. Swing timers are different. They don't work very well. You want to make sure the import is java.util.timer. I'm sure it's going to mess people up, so make sure you pay attention to this. Again, you're going to want the java.util.timer import, not the swing timer import. They both kind of, it's one of those weird things where there's conflicts. Make sure you use the util timer, not the swing timer. That's actually it for the global variables we need. So now within the constructor, we're going to do a couple things. We're going to create a player in just a moment. And then we're also going to start our timer. So what we're going to do is game timer equals new timer. That's just going to create it as an actual instance of the timer object, or the timer class, you could say. And then we're going to schedule something within there. So we're going to say game timer dot schedule new timer task, just like that. I think we need another bracket. No, we're going to go open bracket first. Right there. Okay. So yeah, so you create the open bracket here, new timer task, open close, and then curly bracket, and then there's gonna be a curly bracket with a close bracket here, and I think you're gonna need a semicolon after that as well. So what we're gonna do right here is actually I think it should do it for us. Add the import really quick for util.timer task, and then it's gonna ask us to implement the abstract method right there, just the run method, just like that. Again, we're gonna get rid of the throws clause here because we don't want that. And within the run class here, we're going to add this a little bit later, but this is going to be called every single time our timer task goes off. I'm not going to add anything yet, actually. But the last thing we need is we do need a few more parameters within our timer task right here. So here's the end of the curly bracket. After the curly bracket, we're going to add a comma, and then we're going to add how long it takes before we start our timer. We're going to say 0 milliseconds. We don't want any time before the timer starts. Then we're going to say how many milliseconds go in between every frame. And I actually go with 17, and the reason for that, let me just show you right here. I just realized I'm running Premiere. It's probably not a good idea. Seems to be recording fine though. No drop frames or anything. I do have a 1060 on this computer, so it works relatively well. We want our game to run at 60 frames per second. That's just what I like using. It's kind of standard for most games for PC or even Xbox or things like that now. And there's 1,000 milliseconds in every second, so 1,000 divided by 60 is going to give us 16.67, which is closer to 17 than it is to 16, so we're going to make this 17. So what this means is it's going to wait 17 milliseconds in between every single frame, so we're going to get roughly 60 frames per second, just under actually, but relatively close. And we're gonna worry about the run method later. We're gonna worry about that later. We're not gonna do anything with that right now. I think that's about it for this right now. The last thing we're gonna do is we are gonna create the paint class right now really quick. Public void paint, just like that. And you are gonna want to add a import for here. It's gonna be, or not an import, I guess something to be called when you call this method. So we're gonna send graphic G, and that's gonna send the graphics into this method when it's called. I believe we need an import for that. Oh, graphics. Graphics, not graphic, my bad. Add the import for java.util graphics, or java I'm having trouble talking. Java.awt.graphics right there. There's the import in case you missed that. And then within the paint method, we're gonna worry about this later, but really fast, all we're gonna say is we're gonna say super.paintg. This is just gonna paint, I believe it like paints over the previous frame, so that way you don't have flickering. You can see that a little bit later. We don't need to worry about that right now. And then we're gonna cast the graphics to a graphics 2D object just because it works a little bit better. I like using that better for all my stuff with Java. So we're gonna say graphics 2D GTD equals, and we're gonna cast it to graphics 2D G. So this is gonna take the graphics G and it's gonna cast it to graphics 2D in the object called GTD. We're gonna add an import for that. Right there, there's the import. And then everything else we're gonna worry about later. That's about it for this class right now. Oh, the DSB capitalized right there. Now we're gonna create our player class. It will start coming along soon, don't worry. We're gonna click the little white paper right there. We're gonna go to Java class and we're gonna call it player. The capital P, because that's what we named it earlier, unless if you like to name it something else for some reason. Let's try and get our text at the same size here again. Trying to make sure it stays relatively the same size as well. It'd be kind of confusing if it was getting bigger and smaller. Looks good right there. Okay, so within our player, really fast, we're gonna make the constructor right here, public void player. Oh, we don't need void. For a sec. Public player, just like that. Oh, oops, wrong key. And we're gonna send a few variables into player when we create it. So the first thing we're gonna ask for is x, int y, and game panel. Okay. Let me explain this really quick. So when we create a new player, we're gonna tell it the x value that we want it to start at and the y value, and we're also gonna send a panel within here. And this is where it gets kind of confusing. I'll explain in just a moment. Really fast, we're gonna create a global variable outside of our constructor here called game panel. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna, within the constructor, we're gonna say the first line, this dot panel equals panel, just like that. And the reason for this is when you send variables between methods in Java, you're sending the actual variable. So if you have one method with like int x equals 5 and you send it to a different method, you're sending the value 5. You're not sending x. But with objects, it's a little bit different. You can usually tell when something's an object because it's capitalized in Java. That rule usually applies, I guess. So game panel is an object. So by sending it into our player object, we're actually only sending the blueprints to get back to game panel, which is going to be helpful later because within our player we want to access some of the variables that are stored within the panel. I couldn't tell you exactly what they are right now. I believe it's going to be some of the key events and things like that. We're going to want to be able to get back to our panel and access those, as well as all of the walls are going to be stored, like all of the objects will be stored within the panel. Like the walls, and if we add other, like the ground and things like that is going to be stored within the panel. So we want to be able to access that from the player, which is why we send it here. And then the this.panel equals panel just tells our player that this blank panel object we created should be reset to become the panel that was sent into the player. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. That's really complicated. It took me a while to figure that out when I was first learning Java. If not, don't worry about it. Just copy the code. That's my best attempt at explaining it. We're also going to say this.x equals x, and this.y equals y. And these ones should turn, we haven't created the actual x and y yet. So outside of our constructor, again, we're going to say int x, int y. And those should turn green, and so should these. So again, this is telling the player, take the x value that was given to us and set my x value to that You don't always need to use X. We only use it within here because there's two variables with the same name, so that eliminates confusion. If we were in a different method, which I'll show you in just a moment, you don't need to use X. But anyways, we're gonna create a bunch of variables really quick for our player objects. So we have panel and we have X and Y. I'm gonna space this out just because they're different things. We don't want to get too confused. Below X and Y, we're also gonna have width and height. So this is gonna be the width and height of our player. Int width and int height with semicolons after them. A couple other variables we're gonna need is double. Remember, integers are like 1, 2, 3, 4. Doubles have decimals. So like 2.0, 2.1, 2.2, things like that. 2.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They can go as long as you want. Well, actually, I don't know if they can go as long as you want. There's probably a limit. I really couldn't tell you. But double x speed is going to be our horizontal velocity. And then double y speed is going to be our vertical velocity. We break up the movement into two different planes, horizontal and vertical. You'll see why a little bit later, but that just makes it a little bit simpler. And we need 5 more variables here. The first one is going to be a rectangle object, rectangle hitbox, and I'll show you this a little bit later, but rectangle objects are just objects that contain a point where they start, and then a width and a height, and they make a box within those parameters, and we're going to use it for collision checking to see when we're going to run into a wall and things like that. We didn't import really quick here. Import java.awt.rectangle. Right there, okay. And then the last thing we need is just a bunch of variables to see if our keys are pressed. So Boolean key left, Boolean key right, Boolean key up, just like that, and Boolean key down. And remember, Booleans are true-false variables. So those are just going to be used to see if we're pressing the left key, pressing the right key, pressing the left key, pressing the down key. Pretty simple. So then our constructor, we have this.panel equals panel, this.x equals x, and this.y equals y to take in the variables that have been given to us. A couple other things we're going to set up. Width equals 50. Every time my watch is getting in the way. And height is equal to 100, just like that. That's just the width and height of the player. I'll show you that later. And then we're also going to create our hitbox again. This is going to be the rectangle that's going to be following our player to check for collisions. We're going to say hitbox is equal to rectangle x, y, with height, just like that. Wow, we're already using a lot of time, so I'm going to try and speed up a bit here if I can. So I think we're going to stick with that for now. We're going to go back to game panel, and we're going to create our player object. I mentioned that earlier. So within game panel here, we have our timer. We're going to do player equals new player 400, 300, and this. So 400, 300 are the x and y parameters that we're going to be sending to our player right here. Again, Java's actually, I don't know if I said this, but Java starts in the upper left corner. This is backwards. For you guys, it's going to be like this, upper left corner, and then it's going to go this way. I'm doing this backwards because, again, it's flipped. This is my right hand, but it looks like my left. No, it looks like my right hand. Never mind. It's yeah, you get it. It's flipped. So it starts in the corner, and it goes like positive x values go this way, and then positive y values actually go down. So 0, 0 is up in the corner right here. So we're going to give it like 400 and 300, which is going to be roughly in the middle of our panel. Not exactly in the middle, but it doesn't really matter. It's whatever you want. And then again, we're also asking for game panel right here. So by sending it this, we're within the game panel class. So it's going to send it the blueprints to get to this current object. It's giving us an error really quick here. Let's see what this is. Required no arguments found int game panel. So that just hasn't updated. Sometimes this is a glitch that happens with NetBeans. It thinks that we're not asking for anything, even though we are right here. It's just a glitch. I won't worry about it. It should fix itself as soon as we run the program. That happens sometimes in NetBeans. I don't know if there's some way to fix it, but don't worry about that. But really quick, within our run method here, we're going to do two things. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to say player.set. That's a method we're about to create, and that's going to update the player's position based on inputs and things like that. Again, this is going to run every single frame in our program, so eventually if we add like enemies that are going to be moving back and forth, we'll do enemies in some kind of set method or whatever else we decide to call it. I usually would call it update, but update is a built-in method in Java, so make sure you don't call it update. Then the second thing we're going to do is repaint, which is going to call the paint method right here. Normally you would just use paint with like any method, but I think with frames and panels it gets weird with stuff like that. It gets weird. So repaint is like a special thing that'll tell it to pull the graphics and automatically do all that, so you don't have to worry about it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create that set method within player. Go back to our player class here. And outside of our constructor right here, let's say public void set. By the way, I don't think I mentioned this yet, but void just means that it's not returning any variables. If we said like int, then we'd want to return a variable like return 5 like that. Then whenever we call set, it would return 5 right here. So you could say like int, return is equal to this. Actually, return is a built-in thing, but int get return is equal to this. We're not going to be using that right now. So we're just going to call player.set. And then we're not going to return anything, so we're going to say void so it knows we're not returning anything. We're going to get rid of this here. Okay, for the set class. This is where it gets a little bit complicated. Let's actually see how much we're going to add to this right now. We're going to add moving the player later, so we're going to update the speeds later. But for right now, what we're going to want to do is we're going to, we're going to say x plus equal to x speed. Y plus equal to y speed. That's probably end up being the end of our set class. That's going to move our player so that way he can move based on the speed every time. He or she can move their position around the screen, just like that. I think we're actually going to wait on the rest of that for right now. The one other thing we're going to do though is we're going to say hitbox x is equal to x and hitbox.y is equal to y. And what this means is every time we move our player, we want to make sure we move our hitbox along with it so it stays in line with the player. So that way we can keep checking for collisions and it doesn't get left behind at all. But actually, before we add anything else to the set method, we need to do a couple other things. Kind of jumping over the place here. I know it's a little bit confusing, but I'm trying to make it as logically flowing as possible. We're going to have the draw method for our player. So we're going to have public void draw. We're going to take in a graphics 2D variable, GTD, call it the same thing for simplicity. And we only need one line of code here. It's going to be gtd.fillRect, just like that, like rectangle, but abbreviated, x, y with height. So all this is going to do is it's going to draw a rectangle at our x and y position with the width and height that we set before. One of the things we can do is we can set color as well. Let's set the color to be color.black. My screen's got a bit darker. I do need to plug in my laptop. I normally plug it in. I don't know why I didn't today. Give me just a moment for that. Actually, the cord's right here. We're good. So you have a neat desk. There we go. Now it's plugged in. Turn the brightness down just a bit. I don't know why I didn't plug it in earlier. That was my mistake. But a couple of things here. We have two underlying things. We need to add our imports. We're going to have the import for java.awt.graphics2d. That's probably super hard to see for you guys, actually. Jeez, I should keep showing those. I think I haven't for the most part, though. Two imports we added right there were graphics 2D and color, and we added a rectangle earlier as well. Those are just going to be, again, the imports, so we can use those specific things within our code. Just like that, and that's all we're going to need for this line. That's going to make sure that we're drawing our player. So if we go back to game panel, every time we draw the panel here, let me scroll up here really fast. I could do this just from my head and probably still figure it out, but I'll have some errors here and there, and it'll just be hard to cross-reference it back with this, so I'm trying to keep it relatively the same. We're going to say player.draw GTD, and that's going to draw our player. And I think if we run right now, you can see our player right there. There he is. That's where our player is starting. We haven't added any motion yet, but there is our player, and he's displaying on our window, so everything seems to be working well so far. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually add the key inputs. So really fast, we need to create a new object. Let me scroll right down here. So we're going to create a new class right here, a Java class, and we're going to call this key checker is what I call it. You could call it whatever you'd want, but this is where we're going to be reading the key inputs. So key checker is right there, and this is going to get a little bit confusing. This is probably going to be the most confusing part besides that intro with the dimensions. So bear with me and just try and copy the code if you're stuck, and you can figure it out as you go along. I'm going to make this one kind of big because this is going to be confusing, so you guys have to be able to see this. The first thing we're going to do here is we're going to declare a variable before we make our constructor. It's going to be game panel. So this is the same thing as with our player. We're going to be sending our panel into this object. And we're going to say public key checker. This is our constructor right here. Game panel. And then within here, the only thing we need is this dot panel equals panel. Same as before. Again, it's just going to be sending the panel into this object. And then within our class right here, after key checker, we're going to add extends key adapter, and that's going to tell Java that this is something that's going to be listening for key inputs. We'll even need an import for that, awt.event.keyAdapter. Here it is right here. There's the input. And it should ask us to, no, maybe not. I would ask us to import the methods. Maybe not though. Interesting. Okay, well, we can still add them either way. Outside of our constructor, we're gonna add two methods. The first one is gonna be key pressed. Public void key pressed, just like this. And what it's gonna be called within it is key event E. This is gonna be called by the code. It's just gonna do it all itself, so we don't need to call this method anywhere. We're gonna import for key event really quick there. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna say panel.key pressed E. So I'll explain this in just a moment. We're gonna add one other one. Public void key released key event E panel.key released E. And this is gonna cause some errors, don't worry about that. It is gonna ask us to make this an override. No, wait, hold on. Oh, what did I do? Add override annotation, yeah. So we're gonna add the override annotation right above there. Just make sure that's above both of those methods there. But what this is gonna do is the code is gonna call the key press method, and then we're gonna take the key event that it gives it, and we're gonna send it into our panel so we could actually do things with it. So it's gonna give us an error because there is no key press method within the panel. So we can let the code create it for us. We're just gonna use a little arrow here and press the first option. It should be the only option for you guys to create the method right there. Create method, but I'll show you what that did in case you don't get that dialog for whatever reason. We're gonna go to game panel here, and it should have created two methods for us right down here, key pressed and key released. I'm actually gonna move our action performed method beneath it. I'm just gonna copy paste that really quick because we don't need to worry about that. So let's get that out of the way. But we're gonna take key pressed and key released here. First, we're gonna get rid of the throws clauses because we don't need that. So let's get rid of this here, just like that. And then just like that, we're gonna get rid of the throws clauses, and we're gonna add some code behind these key press methods. So let me scroll up really quick to find my code right here. What we're gonna do is we're gonna say if e.getKeyChar. Remember, chars are like characters, char variables. So we're gonna see if the key that was pressed is equal to A, and we're gonna say player.keyLeft is equal to true. So what this is gonna do is gonna see that whatever key event that was just called, that was the code saying, oh, a key is being pressed, we need to do something. It's gonna check and see if that key was the A key being pressed down. It's gonna move the player to the left. And we have those key left, key right, key up, key down variables we created. Those are Boolean variables. And this is just gonna go within the player and tell them that we're moving left. And then we're gonna add if e.getKeyChar equals W, player dot key underscore, or not underscore, just key up is equal to true. Just like that. And we're gonna do the same thing with the other two. e.getKeyChar equals S, we'll do next, player dot key right is equal to true. Things a little sloppy here. If e.getKeyChar is equal to D, player dot key down is equal to true. We've already made one error here. A capital H is going to cause problems. Let's get rid of that. Otherwise, this should be working fine. I think I explained that relatively well. It shouldn't be too complicated. And then we're going to do something. We're just going to copy paste this. I'm going to paste it down here. So we want the exact same thing, but if we're releasing the key, we want to set it to false instead of true. So we're going to change all of these trues down here to false, just like this. So this way, if the key is released, then the code is saying, oh, the key just got released. Let's check and see what it was. If it was A, then we're going to get rid of move left or key left. So that way the player knows that we're no longer supposed to be moving left. Just like that. So that's all we need there. It's actually not too complicated. And now we can go back and create our entire set method within the player. So let's go to player and our set method right here. And let me scroll down and find it really fast. We're gonna have a lot of code here. The first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna say if key left and instead of Java, in Java instead of typing A and D, you type and just like that. Key right. So this is saying if we're moving left and we're moving right, we don't want to do anything because that's telling the player to go in both directions. You know, in games with good like kind of error checking, you don't want to move at all in that case. So we're gonna say if key left and key right, or, and we say or instead of typing OR, we're gonna type in two vertical lines just like that. That's the key right above enter. There should be, at least it is on my keyboard, it should be on yours. So if we're moving left and right, or if we're not doing either, so no keys are being pressed. Again, we're separating the horizontal and vertical component, so none of the horizontal keys are being pressed. And what we're going to do is we're going to do nothing. No, I didn't actually type anything after the or, so we're going to say or not. Exclamation means not in Java. It's actually called bang. So if bang key left and not key right here. There we go, I got ahead of myself. So if we're pressing the left key and the right key, or we're not pressing any keys at all, then we don't want to move, but also we want to decrease our speed, because what we're doing is we're actually going to have our player speed up and slow down rather than just, moving one frame per button. This just makes it a little bit more smooth. I'll show you guys that in a little bit. We're going to say x speed times equal to 0.8, which seems like it's still pretty large. Remember, this is running 30 or 60 times per second, so it's going to get down pretty fast. So 0.8 is a pretty good number. That's just going to slowly decrease it. And then we're going to say else if. So if that's not true, then we're going to check this. If key left is being pressed, but key right is not being pressed, so if key left and not key right, then we're going to say x speed minus minus. And minus minus is the same thing as saying minus equal to 1, which is the same thing as saying x speed is equal to x speed minus 1. Just like that. So we're going to say minus minus just like that. It's just going to subtract 1. Note that minus minus is not actually exactly the same as minus equal to 1, or x speed is equal to x speed minus 1, because this isn't actually going to change the value of x speed. This means that x speed is going to stay the same, but just... Actually, no, this would be the same. Never mind, that's a bad explanation. I'm not going to get into that. Don't even worry about what I just said. Don't even worry about that. That's not worth explaining. X speed minus minus, that's just... Yeah, ignore that. Sorry about that. And then finally, we're going to say else if key right and not key left. I'm going to say x speed plus plus, so we're going to increase x speed by 1, just right there. So that's that. That's going to add our movement. And one other thing we're going to do really quick is we're going to prevent sliding, because actually I'll worry about that later. I'll show you guys kind of what's happening in the fix for it later. We do want max speeds because we're constantly adding to our speed. If we don't have a max speed, it's just going to speed up really fast and fly off of our screen. So actually, let's see if I can show you this right now. We should be set up. No, not yet. Oh, we haven't totally fixed everything. Okay, give me one moment. We need to add a couple other things really fast. We haven't actually created our key checker object within our code yet, so it's not going to do anything. The place we need to do that actually is back within our main frame class, right here. When we're creating the panel, there's one line of code that I left out, which is right up here. And beneath this .add panel, we're going to add a key listener to the panel. So we're going to say add key listener, new key checker, because our key checker was a key listener object. And then within there, we're going to say panel, because again, that's the panel that it's referencing back to within key checker. That is the this .panel equals panel right here. So we're going to add a key listener. Let's see if this works now. There we go. That's all we needed. We haven't coded the D key yet. I thought we did. There's some error with the D key, but we can move to the left there. Really fast. For some reason, our close is not working anymore. I'm not sure why that is. You can see we're running 3 different instances here. Whenever we close the window, it doesn't seem to want to actually in the program. Not sure why that is. We'll figure that out later. But make sure you do click that red button right there so you don't have a ton running in the background. So we're moving to the left, but we're not moving to the right. Let's see why really fast here. AWSD. Oh, I hit the wrong ones here. These are the wrong variables. So A is to the left. We're using WASD. A is to the left. W is up. I said S is to the right and D is down. That was my mistake. This is supposed to be key down, key right. Even when I'm copying code, you still make mistakes. That's part of coding. So that'll happen. Sorry, I know that's annoying. We'll fix that really fast. And now if we run our code, here we go. But if I move to the right, you can see our character flies off the screen super fast. He's moving way too fast, but you can see how it kind of speeds up and slows down. We have 2 problems here. The first one is that he's moving way too fast. And the second one is that if we move to the left, see how he keeps moving? My hand is off the keyboard. But it takes a while to slow down, and that's because we're using that multiplier. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to add 2 different things here within our set method again. The first thing is we're going to make sure they don't speed up too fast. The way we're going to do that is we're going to prevent sliding by saying if x speed is greater than 0, so if it's positive, and x speed is less than 0.75, So if it's between 0 and 0.75, it's moving so slow that we don't want it to move at all. So we're going to say x speed is equal to 0. And the same thing, but in the other direction, if x speed is less than 0 and x speed is greater than negative 0.5, so it's between 0 and negative 0.5, x speed is equal to 0. And then the second thing we're going to do is we're going to add a max speed so we can't be flying off the screen super fast. So all we're going to say is pretty simple. If x speed is greater than 7, we could say like minus minus, but then what if it gets super fast? We're just going to say x speed is equal to 7. So if it's going faster than 7, we don't want it, so we're going to let it go past 7. Then we're going to say if x speed is less than 7, x speed, got the d in the last line, is less than negative 7, then it's equal to negative 7. Just like that. Because again, remember, positive, negative, or for you guys, positive, negative. Trying to do it from your perspective again. So what that's going to do really fast here is if we run the code, we now have no more sliding, first of all. So our character stops when I take my hand off the keyboard. Just like that. And we also have maximum velocities, so we're not going to be flying off screen anymore. This is the fastest we can go. I'm holding down the keys. So that's that. We're going to add a couple other things to our method, our set method, a little bit later, I think, though. Yeah, well, let's add it now. We may as well. We're going to add jumping and gravity. So we have our checkers for max speed right there. We're going to add jumping. This is going to be pretty simple, actually. We're going to say if key up, and then we're going to have code here that's going to check if touching ground. We can't do that yet because we haven't created the wall object yet. And if that is true, then we're going to say y speed minus, or is equal to negative 6. So we're going to set the speed equal to negative 6, so it's moving up. And then we're going to say, actually that's it for right now because we'll add the rest of that later. And then after that, we're going to say y speed is plus equal to negative 3. And that's just going to be anti-gravity right there. So I think everything else is collision checking. Yeah. So let's run this. Again, I'm forgetting to close out of my things on the bottom there. You can see now we have jumping and gravity. You can just jump all you want because there's no collision set up or anything like that yet. But there's jumping and gravity. We can use W to go up, and S doesn't actually do anything. We could do like super jumping or whatever in the future, crouching, things like that if we wanted to. So that's that. Now we can jump and things like that. The next thing we want to do is we want to create obstacles and finally add collisions, and then we're actually going to be all done. I think we're not actually too far behind on time. There's some water with us. This microphone is super sensitive, so it probably sounds really weird when I drink. I'm sorry. But now we're going to create our wall object right over there. So we're going to click the white paper right here. We're going to go to next. We're going to press wall, capital W, just like that. Oh, they moved it down here. Let's move it up to there. That's where we want it. So we have our wall object, and we make the code a little bit larger here. There we go, and this is going to be, right now I was creating one wall object. You could create a bunch of different ones if you wanted to, and this is going to be for collision checking, so we have like the floor, the wall, the ceiling, they're all going to be just within the wall object for right now, to check for collisions and things like that. So within the wall object, we want to create a bunch of variables again. Int x, int y, int width, and int height. Just like that. So what that's going to do is give our wall, the x and y for the position and the width and height again, just as the same as the rectangle object was. And we're actually going to create a rectangle object as well. Excuse me, rectangle hitbox. Import it right there, import java.awt.rectangle. This is going to be the same as the player. It's going to be a hitbox to check and see if we're doing collisions, and you'll see how that works in just a bit. Now we're going to create the constructor. It's actually not a lot of code within the wall object. Public wall, int x, int y, int width, int height. And what we're going to do is this dot x equals x, this dot y equals y. Let me scroll that down a bit so you can see it better. This dot width equals width, and this dot height equals height. This way we can choose all the parameters for our wall when we create it, and we can change it depending on what instance we're using. But we're going to keep them all the same for this tutorial. And then finally, we're going to say hitbox is equal to new rectangle x, y with height. So the hitbox is going to be wherever the actual object is. I don't know why I can't spell the word width today. That's like 3 different times. I know what to spell it, I'm just mistyping. And finally, within wall, we're going to add a draw method. Same as our player, we're gonna say public void draw. You don't want to use paint because I think again paint is built in. It might get messed up, I'm not sure, but we're not gonna do that. So we're gonna say draw graphics 2D or graphics 2D GTD, no dot. This is gonna be to draw our wall. What I want to do is I want to do a little frame of like one color and then fill it with a different color. So really fast, we're gonna import right there. It's just imports awt.graphics2d right there. We're gonna draw our wall. The first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna draw the border. We're gonna do that in black. So gtd.setColor, color.black, and want to import the color really quick. I believe it's awt.color. There, awt.color. And then we're gonna fill in the rectangle, or we're gonna draw the rectangle. gtd.drawRect will just draw it. It will not fill it in. FillRect is actually fill it in. So this is just gonna draw our border really fast. X, Y with and height, just like that. So this is gonna draw our outline for our wall in black. Then I'm gonna set the color to white because the walls are actually gonna be white. They're just gonna have a black outline. So gtd.setColor, color.white, just like that. We're gonna do gtd.fillRect, and we're gonna say again X, Y with height. We're gonna get rid of all these annoying preset ones right there. X, Y with height. But actually this is just gonna draw over the last thing we just made. So instead of saying X, Y with height, we're actually gonna say X plus 1, Y plus 1. This way it starts here and we'll move it in just 1 right there. So that way we're not drawing over a border. And then we're gonna say width minus 2 and height minus 2, because that will compensate for the borders on both sides. The horizontal borders and the vertical borders. There's 1 on each side, so minus 2 and minus 2. Hopefully that makes sense. That's going to be it for a wall object. Actually, the rest of it is going to be on the creation side. So we're going to go back to game panel, and after we create our player, let me scroll up really fast here. Right back here. After we create our player, we're going to call a method called make walls. I want to put this in a different method. This is right here. So within game panel, within the constructor, after we create the player, we're going to say make walls. We could put it right here, but we're going to put it in a different method just for simplicity. And so we can change it if we want, like have different walls generated depending on what we're doing. Make walls right there. We're going to create the make walls method outside of the constructor, public void make walls. Just like that. We're not going to have any parameters right now, but we could add that in the future if we wanted to. And then the make walls method is, this is going to be a bit complicated, but we're going to generate a bunch of walls using like 2 lines of code, just because that'll be a little bit simpler. So we're going to say for int I equals 50, I is less than 650, I plus equal to 50. So what that's going to do is this is the for loop, and it's going to start I at 50. What is our error here? We did something wrong here. Oh, we don't need the close bracket there. That's what we don't want. Yeah. So we're gonna create an integer I equals 50. This is like a counting variable. It's gonna start at 50. Then every time we run this loop, it's gonna add 50 to I. And then once I gets to 650, it will stop. And I'll show you why in a second. And we're gonna say walls.add. Oh, we need to create the walls array list. That's what we were gonna do earlier, and we ended up not doing it. So right above our player right here, we're going to create an array list to store all of our walls within. This is going to be really helpful for collision checking later. Excuse me. So array list of walls is going to be an array list of the wall object. Walls, just like that, is equal to new array list. Again, that's kind of confusing. So array list is a place where we store objects. This array list specifically will take in wall objects, and it's going to be called walls. That makes sense. I'm going to have to import java.util.arraylist. Let's see, import right there. So there's the walls array list. And now if we go back down, first we need to actually create an instance of the walls array list. Or no, we do it right here, equals new array list. So we're all good. So within our make walls method, within this for loop, let's spit that out properly. There we go. We're going to say walls.add new wall I 600 50. Just like that. So this is going to create a new wall and add it to our array list, and it's going to set the x value of that wall to whatever our counting variable is at, the y value to 600, and then the width and height will be 50. So let me run this really fast and show you guys. We haven't actually painted our walls yet, so there's nothing there. So within our paint method, after we do player.wall, we're gonna paint all of the walls. So the way we'll do that is, give me just a moment to find this. We're gonna do another for loop. We're gonna do for walls. This is a for each loop. Works a little bit differently. If you don't understand it, just copy it. I'm not gonna get into that right now. It's essentially the same thing as what we just did above, just a little bit different syntax. So stepping through the entire wall's array list for each individual wall, we're going to call the wall.draw method that we created right here where we draw our wall. So now if we run our game, you can see all of our walls right there, but we're going to fall right through them because we haven't set up any collisions yet. Let me close out of both of our current games running right now. And there we go. So now we're going to go back to our make walls method, and we're going to add in walls for us to collide with on the sides as well. This is what I came up with for the game earlier. You can add however you want. Just walls that add a new wall, and then whatever you want the X value to be. I'm gonna do 50, 550, 50, 50, just like that. You can add it whatever you wanted though. I'm actually gonna copy paste this over because this really isn't important at all. You can add the walls however you want. This is just what I chose right here. Just like that. We're gonna space this back over. That's proper spacing. I'm gonna pause, or you can pause the video right now if you want to just copy this down for the same thing as me. I'll make it extra large. You can see it super well. There you go. If you want to pause the video, and you can copy that down, or make the walls however you want. That's just what I'm gonna be using. So back out. Actually, why don't I just keep it large? There's no point in making it super small. It's just hard to see exactly where we are in the class. I'll keep it a little bit larger though. Nothing wrong with that. Just like that. So now if we run our code. You can see we have walls right there for us to collide with, just for testing purposes. Again, we're not going to do it yet because we haven't added that. The collisions are actually going to be the last thing we need to add, and then we're going to be all done with this tutorial. So our time is not looking too bad. It's a little longer than I expected, but not horrible. Having the code pre-made obviously helps a lot. So we're going to add in collisions finally. Let's stop that instance right there of our game. So I think just about all of this is going to be within the player set method. Let me go to the set method over here within player. We are with any set method right here. Let me grab some water super fast. Okay, so within our jumping method here, with key up and Y speed and all that, I did say we would check and see if we were touching the ground. So we're going to do that first. This is where it gets a little complicated. I've said that a couple times. There's really only a few complicated things about this video, but this is actually probably the most complicated thing, more than the key checker. But it's something that, like, the key checker, if you don't understand it, you're probably not going to understand it. But this one, you should be able to kind of visualize in your head. So hopefully you'll be able to get it, and I'll try and explain it as well as I can. So we're going to check and see if our player is on the ground. So right now, remember, our hitbox is following our player exactly. Wherever our player goes, our hitbox follows along with it. So what we're going to do is we're going to check 1 pixel below our player. And we're going to do that by saying hitbox.y++. So we're going to move the hitbox down by 1 position. This is 1 pixel below our player. And then we're going to step through all of our walls. So for walls, panel.walls. This is because the walls array list is stored within our panel, not within our player. So we have to say panel.walls. And this is why we passed panel into our player when we created it right here, so we can get back to it. Because our panels are stored within our walls are stored within the panel, not within the player. So for wall, panel.walls. So for each wall within the walls array list that is stored within the panel, right here we're going to say if the wall is the wall's hitbox is interacting with the player's hitbox, we're going to do an action. So if wall.hitbox intersects hitbox y speed is equal to -6. Let me show you guys something in Paint really fast, just so hopefully that's easy to understand, but I want to show you guys really quick just to be certain. So we have our ground right here. This is probably going to be like even a really bad explanation, but anyways, we have our ground. Here's our player right here, and let's assume that this is 1 pixel right here. That's tiny. That's not what I wanted. Make that a little bit larger. There we go. So this is 1 pixel right here. 1 pixel right there is the distance between our player and the ground right now. So right here we don't want to stop, and then as soon as we move our player down by 1, we're gonna move our player down there, and that's not what I wanted. You guys get the point. We're gonna fill on the ground. Right there. This isn't like GIMP. That's not gonna work. I knew this would be a horrible explanation, but you guys will get the point. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna check our player is right here. So if 1 pixel below the player is touching the wall, we're gonna stop. That probably was totally unnecessary. I'm gonna use that again later though. Later it'll be a little bit more helpful. So this, instead of stopping, what I'm saying, all we're saying is if the player is directly above touching the ground, then we're gonna allow him to jump. And otherwise we're not gonna let him jump because we don't want to be double, triple jumping in the air. We only want to be able to jump if we're touching the ground. Hopefully that makes sense. Again, we'll get to collisions in just a moment, but this is just gonna check for the actual jumping. And I believe one other thing we're gonna want to do after this is our hitbox is gonna be off alignment now. So if we don't call hitbox y minus minus, then it's gonna stay off alignment. So we're gonna make sure it's in the right place here. So we're gonna subtract there. Now it should be good where if we run this, I'm gonna hold down W and we need to get rid of, whoops. We need to get rid of our old y speed minus equals and -6 right there. And now it's only gonna let us jump when we're right above the ground. I'm holding down W, and as soon as I let go, we're gonna slide through the floor. We're not gonna be able to jump, or we're still gonna be able to jump because we're within the object, but as soon as we get below the object, it's not gonna let me jump anymore. I'm holding down W, but we're off the screen, we can't jump anymore. I'll show you one more time. I'm gonna hold down W as soon as we start it, but it's not gonna let me jump till we hit the platform. Oh. Holding W before made me click out. Yeah, it works, trust me. You guys will see in just a moment. So there's our jumping. We're making sure we're on the floor, but we're still not colliding with anything. We're falling through the floor. We're gonna fall through walls. So now we need to add our actual collisions. And the way we do that is right after the jumping. We're adding gravity. We're gonna do this after gravity, because we want gravity to be implemented first, and then the last thing we want to do is collisions, and then update speed, and then update hitbox in that order. And that's just kind of the logical flow. So for the horizontal collisions, I'm going to comment this. I haven't been commenting this whole video, but I'm going to comment this right here just so we don't get lost here. And vertical collision. Just like that. Again, backslash is a comment. It doesn't actually have any real code. It's just for your own reference if you guys didn't know that. Hopefully you already know that though. So the first thing we're going to do again is we're going to move the hitbox like we did last time. This time, instead of saying hitbox plus plus though, we're going to say hitbox.x plus equal to x speed. So this is going to move our box to where our player will end up if we don't have a collision. And we're going to say same thing as before, for wall, panel, walls. So stepping through all of our walls within the walls array list. And we're going to check and see if it intersects. So if hitbox.intersects. Intersects again means that the rectangles are touching at all. If you guys didn't, I feel like that kind of is intuitive, but didn't guess that. If it intersects with wall.hitbox, so if our own player's hitbox, again, this is our player's hitbox. This is the hitbox specific to the wall that we're checking right now. If it intersects with wall.hitbox, then we need to do some stuff, so it can't actually go into the wall. So first we're gonna, excuse me, we're gonna say hitbox.x minus equals to x speed, because we want to bring the hitbox back to the original position. So our player's here, the wall is here, we're moving the hitbox to the projected position. We see there's a collision. We're gonna move it back to the player, so now we can do a different test. So we're gonna move it back, and then we're gonna say, well, there is not a collision between the wall's hitbox intersects and our own hitbox. Right there. So while, again, we move our own hitbox, or our own hitbox is back on our player. This is the wall. While there's not a collision between the player and the hitbox, who are now in the same position, then we're gonna move forward. So we're gonna move as close to the wall as we can without touching it. We're gonna do that by saying hitbox.x plus plus. The plus plus wouldn't work if we're doing a collision on the left, because then it'd be in the negative direction. So what we're actually gonna do is math.signum x speed. And all signum does is it takes the value of it, being positive or negative. So, hitbox.x plus equal to. So if x speed is greater than 0, then math.signum x speed is going to be 1. If x speed is less than 0, math.signum x speed is going to be -1. You could also divide it by its absolute value, but that's a little bit more complicated. I feel like this was a little bit easier to understand. So I'll actually show you the description right here. Math.signum. You can't see it, it's too small. But yeah, it just returns if it's less than 0, -1, if it's greater than 0, 1. Math.signum, x speed, just like that. So now this is where we're going to keep moving as close as we can to the wall without touching it. And in this while loop, this entire line is going to keep running until we're right next to the wall. And then because this is going to actually, well, this is the thing. It's actually going to keep running until we're touching the wall because we're using intersects. So the hitbox, this is another common mistake. If we didn't have this next line, then it would actually move 1 pixel away from the wall. This is going to keep moving until we're actually touching the wall. I'm not going to use paint to show you guys. Paint is kind of rudimentary. It's not going to work well. This is going to keep moving until we're touching the wall, and then we want to back step 1 more. So we're right before touching it. So we're going to say hitbox x minus equal to, but instead of saying minus equal to 1, again, that won't work if we're going in the negative direction. We want this to work in both directions. So we're going to say minus equal to math.signum x speed, just like that. So this is going to back step 1, so this way we're 1 away from hitting the wall. X speed is equal to 0, because once we touch the wall, I mean, you're going to stop. And then x is equal to hitbox.x. So this whole time we've been checking just with the hitbox. We've been moving the hitbox closer and closer and closer. And then once we were touching the wall, we moved it back 1. But our player is still over here. So we want to move our player up to the hitbox at that point, so it's in the right position. That's actually it for the whole collision. That's all we need to do. It's kind of complicated. Hopefully it makes sense, though. It's not the most complicated thing in the world. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do a vertical collision. And I'm going to cheat a little bit. We're actually just going to copy the horizontal one. And we're going to paste it right here for vertical, because vertical works exactly the same. The only thing we need to do is fix our spacing right here. And we're going to change all of the x's to y's and the x speeds to y speeds. And that should be all we need to do. So x's go to y's, x speeds go to y speeds, and this will give us a vertical collision, both falling into the ground as well as hitting our head on the ceiling. All of our x's go to y's, x speeds go to y speeds, just like this. And that should be it. So let's run our code, see if we have any errors. We shouldn't. So we're able to move left and right, we're able to jump, and we're colliding with the floor. It looks like just fine. And then if we collide with the wall right there, works perfectly. And it works perfectly. Okay. There we go. So again, one more explanation, because I know this is kind of complicated. So our player is moving close to the wall. Until it actually is going to touch the wall, we do nothing. And as soon as we're 1 movement away, like 1 frame away from hitting the wall, that we're going to hit it in the next frame, our code will detect that, and it will say, okay, if we let this frame run, we would be inside the wall. So then we're going to take the hitbox and keep moving it closer and closer to the wall until we're about to, or until we touch it. Until we touch it. And then we back step 1, because there's no way to check if you're about to touch it. It doesn't work that way. So you have to actually keep going until you're touching, and then go back 1. And then we move our player up to there as well. That's kind of complicated. When you're looking at it like this, it's hard to think of it in that way. But that's what's going on here. We have all our collisions working, and that's going to be it for this video. So this looks like roughly an hour, a little bit over, but hopefully I can upload videos this long on a new channel. Should be able to, hopefully. This was kind of long. Most tutorials probably will not be this long. But again, let me know, comment if you guys like the music or don't. I forgot to say that, I think. Yeah, if you guys like the music, let me know. If you don't like it, let me know. It's just free copyright stuff, copyright free stuff in the background. Sorry, my brain's a little slow after coding for an entire hour and talking about it. I'll look at the screen. My video's over there, so I keep looking over there. But yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like and subscribe for future videos, and I'll link the playlist for this tutorial series. Drop a comment if you have any questions or something isn't working right. I'll try and respond as best I can. You know how it is, YouTube, but I'll do my best to reply. And drop a comment on anything you'd want to see in future videos. But otherwise, thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking to the whole tutorial, and I'll see you guys in the next one.